At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
It is a new day for 911 professionals. They have gone from the most important person you will never see to the most vital piece of public safety. Truth be told, they always have been. The curtain has been pulled back, and they are sharing their stories. Welcome to Imagine Listening. Your worst day is our everyday, by Ricardo Martinez II, and narrated by myself, Ricardo Martinez II, and distributed by Beacon Audio Books. Copyright 2023. That's right, everyone. Finally, I can let everyone know the rumors are true. Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday is now available as an audiobook on Audible, and it's a long time coming. Very excited. Not a lot of authors get the opportunity to voice their own book, but I had the honor and privilege to do so. So thank you to Beacon Audio Books, as well as my publisher, Titled Town Publishing, for everything, but especially all of you for making the I Am 911 movement, as well as Imagine Listening, what it is today. I appreciate you all more than you know. So go ahead, head out, stream it, download it, however you consume your audiobooks. Imagine Listening is now available. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. Al Pacino may have been talking about football when he said this line in Any Given Sunday, but he might as well have been talking about 911 dispatch. Every second on every call could be the difference for the person on the other end of the line, and you use your hard-earned skills to save as many of them as possible. Now, there's a tool that can help you save more of them. Prepared Assist is built to save you from repeating a question, from having to add an extra note, and from pulling in a third party to translate. That's why telecommunicators are saying they use it on every single call. Save the seconds that save lives with Prepared Assist. Visit prepared911.com/assist to learn more. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 548 of Within the Trenches, True Stories from the 911 Dispatchers Who Live Them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast. Thank you so very much, and all of you as well who are watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. I appreciate you more than you know. It is May 28th, and this month has gone by fast. There are all kinds of episodes that are coming up, and we've got national conferences, everything that is going to be coming up as well. And I am fresh back from basically 2 months back to back of traveling. And I'm finally getting a chance to put out these Imagine Listening sessions. I have Imagine Listening sessions from back in March. So a few months back. And that's what this episode is going to be. Usually when I do an Imagine Listening episode, I do 2 episodes, one portion for Imagine Listening itself, and then the second episode is the open mic piece. But for this one was, again, March 2024, out at the Mayan ranch for the 911 leadership event that goes on out there that the 360-degree dispatcher puts on. That is Joe Serio, as well as his right hand Amy. And we were out there. It was an amazing week. It was so good. And there were so many stories that were said out loud during the Imagine Listening part. We went over a little bit, and there were only about 10 or so minutes worth of the funnier, lighter side of dispatch, those types of stories for the open mic piece. So this is all one big episode. Also, the stories that were written, I've recorded those and added those stories in there as well. So instead of splitting them up into 2, it's going to be one full-on episode, and I hope you enjoy. And without further ado, here is episode 548 of Within the Trenches. But this is an Imagine Listening in open mic session. Imagine watching your son take off on his 4-wheeler. You have witnessed this many times. He rides, he has fun, and all is well. Now imagine you're 911, taking a call from frantic parents who have just found their son underneath his flipped 4-wheeler. You listen to the parent scream while removing it off his body. You tell them that help is on the way, and you give them CPR instructions. An officer arrives, and you listen as he performs CPR. "Come on, buddy, come on," is what you hear over the phone. This is what it's like within the trenches of 911. In this episode, you will hear stories from the I Am 911 movement, a movement I started for the reclassification of dispatchers from clerical to protective and bring awareness to the types of calls that 911 dispatchers answer on a daily basis. This is an Imagine Listening session, and we're here together in 2024 at the Mayan Ranch. Now, you heard the warning at the beginning, but I must warn you again and add that if you suffer from PTSD or have suicidal tendencies, you are listening at your own risk. The stories you're about to hear are all true and come from the dispatchers who lived them. While some stories have a good outcome, the majority are horrifying. This is our reality. Your worst day is our everyday. So let's start with a bang. I want you to imagine each story. Become the dispatchers taking each call, and imagine listening.
So early on in my career, I had about 2 years into dispatch. I was about 20 years old. And I take a 911 call one day for a passerby reporting a motor vehicle accident. It's a car into a tree, car is smoking. I start doing my diligence and asking the right questions. Were you involved? How many other vehicles? And this female tells me she was just a passerby. I asked her if she was willing to get out of her car and approach that vehicle. She was. She walked up to the car, she stayed on the phone with me, and I said, "How many people are in the vehicle?" She said, "It's just one person." I said, "Tell me what you see." There was a lot of blood. Nobody was moving. The person was not moving inside the car. So I began to do the EMD. Are they breathing? Do you see their chest rising? As I'm asking her these questions, she just kept repeating, "There's a lot of blood." And I had to, she quickly turned into a critical caller where she was becoming hysterical. And I kept trying to get her roped back into helping me in the situation to figure out what was exactly taking place. I asked her if she would see if he had a pulse. She kept repeating that he doesn't have a face. And I tried to get her to explain that more and more, and she just kept repeating, he doesn't have a face. She became so hysterical in this process that I realized I needed to now separate from the incident I was trying to work and now deal with the caller that I'm working with. I sent my units, they were responding. I knew I wasn't going to be able to use her successfully to get any further updates on this situation. Finally calming her down to a point that she was now understanding who she was and where she was, and that somebody was going to be there shortly. I just stayed on the phone with her, and we just kept talking. And now it just became conversations about life and just trying to get her back into reality. I had an officer call out about a 8th mile down the road, and he says, I got something in the street here. I'm going to stand by with this, send the rest of the units further up. That officer had come back after and he had told me that what he had found in the road. So this gentleman had previously tried to commit suicide, and he was not successful. And on this specific day, he decided he was going to go drive around one of the country back roads we have until he found a nice tree. He got out of his car, he tied a rope around that tree, fed that rope through the back passenger window, put it around his throat, leaned his seat back, put the car in drive, and he took off. The officer had located that gentleman's head with the rope still attached on the edge of the roadway. And I now had a better view. I know in this class I had talked yesterday about how I try to see things differently, and this was the incident that did that. Because here I thought it was just a car accident. It was just trauma. It was something, I could try and walk this person through. She wanted to do CPR, she wanted to help, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And the whole, he doesn't have a face. I never correlated that to, he doesn't have a head. I didn't ask the right questions. I was so narrow-minded on, this is a car accident. That girl had no ties or correlations to public safety. About 2 weeks later, she actually came into the call center and spoke to a supervisor. I was on a day off. And enjoying my day off, my phone rings and it's my boss. And I don't want to pick it up. I'm like, I'm getting ordered in on a day off, don't want to do it. And someone said, pick up the phone. So when I did it, he said, what are you doing? I told him I'm relaxing, I'm sitting down. He said, perfect. And he began to explain to me that this lady had come in and she wanted to meet the dispatcher. Because she just experienced something that was the worst for her. And she had nothing to do with the original situation. And she couldn't comprehend what was going on, but she knew she was at her lowest point. And rather than me continue to push and try and figure out how to work that call, I realized I had to work with her. And she said that the only reason she was able to cope with this whole incident and deal with this whole situation was because of the way that I spoke to her. And I carried myself through that. And it was one of the worst days of her life, she said. Until that moment where I was able to kind of bring her back to reality. And it came full circle for her. And that was also a day where, again, being fairly new to the job, this was my 3rd suicide in 6 months. And it was what I thought was a car accident. And it resonated so much with me about how we can't get narrow-minded in these situations, and we have to understand that we're not there to see it. And with new innovations, it really changes things for us as an entirety, that with video coming along, we can try and work things better. But in that specific moment, I was not seeing what she was seeing. I wasn't comprehending what she was comprehending. The only thing I was able to do was realize I now had a high-intensity caller that was frantic, and that became my priority. And she came to tell my supervisor that she herself, after dealing with this incident, was contemplating suicide. And in turn, she had picked up the phone, she called 911 to talk to a dispatcher. And it was a different dispatcher in a different agency, she lived in a different area, and that dispatcher talked her off the ledge. It just goes to show how far across the board it really resonates with these people, with what we try to do. Even if we don't intend to do those things the way we do, we find a path to do it. But it was just one of those situations that I never looked at the job the same. And that's why when I talk about what I bring to my team and my centers, I try to bring a different view, a different perspective. There's other ways that you can look at things, and by doing so, you might be able to save somebody else if you can't save the emergency situation directly in front of you. That was my story.
Thank you. I took a call from a very nice man that was a bail bonds agent. He was calling to let us know that he would be serving a warrant at a hotel in one of our contract cities. He was so nice. I took his information, sent a patrol file, and told him to be safe before disconnecting. A short while later, I got a 911 call from another bail bonds agent telling me he was serving a search warrant and the subject was shooting at them. When I asked him for the address, he didn't know it. I asked for the cross streets and name of the hotel. He did not know those either. I remember that I felt frustrated that he couldn't tell me where he was. He was so calm. I remember thinking, how is this guy so calm when he's being shot at? I finally got the location and sent an 1111. Officer needs emergency backup. He then told me his partner was hit and that he couldn't get to him because the suspect was still shooting at them. Our deputies got there, but the suspect had fled by then. When the deputies and the fire department got to the hotel, they told us the person hit had died. I learned about 20 minutes later, he was my first caller, the really nice man that called in the search warrant earlier. This was so hard for me because I thought, was I the last person he talked to other than his partners? And I'll never forget being mad that I told him to be safe at the end of our call, and he died anyway. I am 911. I was working the night you snuck out of your house at the age of 16. You got in the car with friends who were drinking underage. So were you. You all got into a motor vehicle accident. It was a rollover. My deputies arrive on location, and the car is on its side, and you were partially ejected, hanging over the side of the door and through the window. You were dead. My deputies went to your house to do a death notification. Your mom answered the door, and my deputies told her what happened. She said you were asleep in your bed, but she had no idea you had snuck out. I am 911. A girl called in on 911 saying she was in a park in our area. She stated she was unsure of her location in the park, and Annie Alley wasn't giving a good location. She states multiple times, whispering she can't remain on the phone. I try to keep her on the line, but she whispers that she can't get caught on the phone. She whispers about someone following her. The line disconnects. Her phone was a disconnected line, so there's no calling her back. Officers make it on scene and find the girl. She's on the ground behind the park sign with a gunshot wound to the head. I was the last voice she heard. I am 911. You dialed 911 and dropped the phone. I listened as you and your boyfriend tried to convince John not to do it. You kept yelling at John to stop and not be stupid. I could hear struggling. And then, a gunshot. I heard you scream and your boyfriend yelling. Finally, your boyfriend called 911 and got my partner sitting next to me. He told us that John had shot himself. We jumped into action to see if John could be saved. What we didn't find out until months later was that John had you in a headlock with the gun to your head. John pulled the trigger multiple times, but the gun only fired when his arm slipped and the bullet hit him instead. That was the first time I heard gunshots over the phone. I never got to speak to you. I hope you have healed and found peace. I am 911. Shortly after I got out of training, I took a call from a suicidal man. We had a lot of calls with him being suicidal, but I'd never talked to him before. He was 2 weeks into a job as a security officer at a nearby hotel. That night, he found a gun that a guest of the hotel had left behind in their room. He took the gun, went to a side roof of the hotel, and called 911. I answered. I spoke to this individual for about 55 minutes before he pulled the trigger. I tried to get him to put down the weapon and meet with officers. He refused. I tried to get him talking to me about so many things. Some he did not want to discuss, others he did. When he actually did it, I don't believe it was close to the phone because it was more of a whoosh sound, not a gunshot. After the call, my colleagues were supportive. People told me I built rapport, but I could not help feeling like a failure. I tried for almost an hour to help this man, and I failed. The next day, I spoke to my mother about the call. She said something to me that I would never have thought of myself. She said, "How amazing is it that you gave him what he needed in the last moments of his life? You were there for him to tell his story, assure him that his body would be found and his message would be heard." I was able to realize that there was positive to what I had done, and I could not have controlled the outcome. I am 911.
I'll do my best to get through this.
We're here with you.
I wanted to give another perspective. I did not take this phone call, but I want also folks to understand, just because I wasn't the one to take that phone call did not mean it did not affect every single person in our center. Not to mention this particular incident. It rocked our entire community. I was actually on a vacation day, and my boss called and says we need to activate the critical incident stress management team, which I was part of. I think I was the only dispatcher on the team at the time. And I said I would like to come in and relieve someone that's on the floor. She gave me a brief rundown of what happened. So I'd rather relieve someone on the floor than actually be part of the debriefing, because it had to do with a young child that was around my nephew's age. And I got to work, and I heard briefly about what was going on. Every officer on the radio, every officer that would call in, you could feel the heaviness in their voice. And you heard for them, and your heart just gets burdened with this. But a gentleman had unfortunately taken some drugs that messed him up. And he stabbed his 4-year-old son to death in his apartment, and then took his body out to the parking lot and kept doing it, and was screaming for everyone to hear. The entire apartment community could see what was happening, and they were calling in. And again, I was not there for the original part that this happened, but we got a lot of calls since and afterwards. And I don't think those dispatchers ever recovered. I don't think they ever worked through their pain, which is, I understand. Every single officer, every single person that worked in that city was affected. And they rallied with the mom. And I think they even knew where she worked. The police officers in her local jurisdiction knew They called them. They went and escorted her to our police department to give them this information. And I didn't want to. I don't often look into the people that we help. I don't need to see their faces. I don't need to see the pictures. And it was one of those things on Facebook where you can't avoid it. Somebody else posted it and I happened to see it. He could have been my nephew's brother. They looked blonde hair, blue eyes, 4 years old, the sweetest faces, complete innocence. And it just rocked us. They then created a few things in the name of that child for that police department. They named it, they used his name, it's his room. And now anytime they have to take a child from a situation, they get to go into that room and they can sleep, they have food, there's anything that they need until better provisions can take place. But I just wanted to put it out there that just because I didn't take the call, even if you're in the room, if you're the dispatcher in that situation, you didn't take the call, you still are going to get those emotions. You're still going to be impacted by what's going on in your community and your center and with your officers and your firefighters and your fellow dispatchers. And those things don't go away. That's my story.
Thank you.
I haven't told this story very many times just because I do get very emotional. I've been dispatching for 8 years. This call came in 4 years into my career. Nothing has ever affected me before that. Nothing has ever affected me after that. But it was a dad that had got home from work, and he called and he had found his daughter upstairs in the bathroom. She had passed away. She was beyond help. She was 13. At the time, she was the same age as my daughter. She's 17 now. We did everything we could. We tried CPR, but he already knew she was gone. So about the week after, and everyone had done their investigations and talked to everybody, the assistant fire chief came back in. And he talked to me about it. And he had told me that she was getting ready for school. She was supposed to have caught the bus that morning. And she had a hairbrush in her hair when she died. And the part that really, really got me, I'm listening to him, I'm taking it in. He said that she had asked her mom to fix her hair that morning. And her mom told her no because she was running late for work. And it killed me as a mom. And it changed me forever after that. It changed me forever with my kids and waking them up for school, sending them to school. I don't rush them. I don't get angry with them. If we're late, we're late. It slowed me down so much to make time for my kids, and I'll never forget her.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've been doing this for about 20 years, and not many calls have gotten to me, but I took one about 6 months ago that really just got to me. My agency, we had to dispatch and take calls at the same time. So I was working one of the busier law channels in our county, and I get a call. It just happened to be on the same side of the county that I'm working on. So I answer the call, and it's a lady just screaming, just crying, just saying, help me, help me, help me. So I verify the address, do all that stuff, try to verify the address. She wasn't giving me a whole lot of information. So, I used just, where her cell phone was plotting, just to get a general direction. Started my deputies that way, and then asked her what was going on, and she was just screaming and crying and saying, "Help me, is not breathing." So I finally get her calmed down a little bit and find out that it was a 17-day-old baby that was taking a nap. At the time, I thought it was the mom woke up and the baby wasn't breathing. So she ran outside and was just screaming, just uncontrollable. Nothing. I was trying, repetitive persistence, using her name, everything I could to get her to calm down so we could start CPR and try to save this baby, and it just didn't. Nothing was working, and she just kept screaming and screaming, and it's just something about that particular call that just got with me. Finally I was able to try to start CPR. She kept saying that, the baby had blood in its mouth, and so in the back of my mind, I'm like, what's going on here? What really happened? This is more than just the baby didn't wake up from a nap. But as I'm thinking about that, I'm still trying to do CPR and doing everything I can to try to save this little kid. Finally, a neighbor across the street came out and took over and started doing the compressions. I mean, the baby was gone. There was no saying, but we still have to try. Once the call was over, so this call was kind of out in a rural area, so I was on the line for a while before responders arrived on scene. Once the call was over, I was like, I need somebody to take my channel, and I just had to get up and just leave the room and go into our quiet room and just sit there. I've taken calls like that, I don't know how many times. I mean, 20 years I've taken tens of thousands of calls, but there's something about that call that just stuck with me. One of my coworkers is on our peer support team, so I went and gave her a call, and I went out to my car and just talked about it, and it was really rough. After the call, after I talked to my peer support, I talked to her. I was like, I need to go home for a second, and I need some time. So I went home, took a shower, came back, and when I got back, I sat down back at the console, picked my channel back up, and they were still on scene of that incident crime scene was out there. There were probably 15 deputies out there. And I'm like, what the hell happened here? Turns out the lady I was talking to, I thought it was the mom. It wasn't mom. She was a babysitter. So this, father, I think the father and the mother weren't together. The father let the neighbor watch the kid so he could go to work. 17-day-old baby, you leave it with somebody you think you can trust, and come home and the baby's gone. It was rough because I thought there was some sort of foul play involved. In dispatch, your mind starts racing. We try to figure out what's going on because we don't always get that closure. So your mind's racing, trying to figure out what's going on. I went to my ops manager and I said, hey, can I get some follow-up on this call? And so he reached out to one of the sergeants, and sergeants, came back and said, just asphyxiation. The baby just rolled over or was laying face down and just passed away. And I was like, that just didn't feel right because, there was blood involved. There's just something wasn't right. So we dug a little bit further, and it ended up just being asphyxiation because I guess when a baby when somebody chokes, there's a little bit of blood in the sputum and stuff, and that's what it was. It was just, I don't know, that call just rocked me, and I don't know what it is about that particular call, because like I said, I've taken calls like that several other times. That one just got to me, and it just stuck with me. But I do, I took that bad call and turned it into a positive, so I play that when our new folks come in the academy, and I use that as part of the caller management class, just to kind of give an example of a truly hysterical caller. And it's a rough call, but it's a good. I try to turn it into a positive and use it as a teaching moment, just to help some of my coworkers, so that in case they have to come across something like that, they can try to deal with it the best they can. But it's a rough one.
Thank you.
So, I don't know where to start with this. I've been dispatching for 4 years, a little over 4 years, and we've taken a lot of, domestic violence calls and verbal disturbances and stuff, and you get used to it for the most part. Well, this particular call, the caller was a 12-year-old girl. And she's, trying to tell me what's going on. I can hear screaming and yelling in the background. She says, "Dad has the gun." I was like, okay, well, what's going on? Where are you in this whole situation? Where are you? Where's Dad? She's like, "Dad's in the kitchen with the gun. Mom's trying to get it away from him. They were fighting. They've both been drinking." I was like, okay. "Who else is there with you?" And she's like, "I have my little brother with me." I was like, okay. Can you guys get outside? Trying to get them away from Dad with the gun. She's like, "I don't want to leave my mom." It's like, "Can you get your mom to go with you outside? Can you guys leave the house? Can you get away from Dad?" She's like, "I don't know. I don't want to leave my mom." She just kept saying, I'm not going to leave my mom. I don't want to leave my mom. And I was like, "I need to get you and your brother somewhere safe." And so finally, the mom comes into the room. The mom and dad were in the kitchen. The girl and her brother were in the living room. Mom comes in, and I'm like, "Can I talk to your mom?" The mom gets on the phone. She's just crying and screaming. I can't get anything from her. And then the little girl gets back on the phone, and she's a little more calm. I was like, "Can you get Mom and brother to go outside with you?" She's like, I could hear her talking to her mom. She's like, "Mom, we need to go outside. The lady wants us to go outside." And I couldn't exactly hear what the mom was saying, but she's like, "Please, Mom, please, let's just go outside. The lady wants us to go outside." And by this point, of course, we have officers headed that way. And finally, the little girl says, she's like, "Okay, we're outside." I'm like, "Okay, I want you to go down the street." I have them start walking towards the direction our officers are coming from. And the mom just is still crying and freaking out. And the little girl is as calm as can be. She's not crying. She's not hysterical or anything. And I'm asking her, all the questions. And, was Dad still in the kitchen? Where's the gun? Does this happen often? Everything like that. And then finally she gets in contact with the officer that was headed that way, and I disconnect the call. And I'm kind of sitting there. They're dealing with the whole thing. And I realize I'm shaking. I feel like I'm hyperventilating. So I kind of just calmly like, "Hey, I'm going to go to the bathroom." And I can't figure out why this one is just messing with me so much. No one got hurt. They're all out of the house. Everything was fine. But I realized that I associated that I was talking to my 12-year-old self. Because everything she was saying, the whole situation she was saying was the exact same situation that I went through. But no one got us out of the house. And I don't know what it was. It just all hit me after. None of this was going through my head while I was on the phone with her, but afterwards, it was crazy that I felt like I was talking to 12-year-old me. Get out of the house. Get your brother, get your sister, get out of the house. And that, because that didn't happen for me, I don't know. It just, it still sticks with me. I still remember her name. I still remember the house address. And every time there's a call on that street, I double check to make sure it's not that address, because I hope that little girl is okay and she's doing better and she didn't have the same memories and trauma, that stuff that I had to go through at her age. And it was kind of like one of those moments of like, that's why I do this job. Because I want to be that person that I didn't have as a kid, that person that was able to help that I never, give the help that I never got, kind of thing.
Thank you.
So I still have a lot of trouble with this story. In 2020, it was a great year for a lot of us, right? It was very, very difficult for me. I didn't take the 911 call for this. My partner did. It was a domestic violence call. Lady called in to say that her husband had been beating her. We asked all the standard questions, checked the history. She had gotten out of the house and was at a neighbor's house. I was on radios. I dispatched officers. I had a FTO and a rookie officer jump the call. Wasn't their district, but they wanted it for training. We checked history, we checked everything. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Other than the type of call. Officers arrive on scene. Within about 2 minutes, I hear shots fired. I hear officers down, officers down. It took me a long time to realize that I actually did close our primary channel, sent emergency tones. I don't remember any of it. At the time, I thought, well, I knew one of the officers that was hurt had previously been my supervisor in dispatch. He had just promoted to officer. In my gut, I knew that they all weren't gonna come out alive. I remember talking to one of my officers and saying, "Get yourself to safety." That night, 3 of my officers were shot. 1 was fatally wounded. After a lot of therapy, still question myself. Still question, did I do everything I could have? Logically, I know we did what we could. But knowing and hearing all of that on the radio is not something I will ever forget. And I hope and pray that no one has to go through that. Because it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I didn't want to be a dispatcher after that. I was ready to throw in the towel. I was ready to just stop. But I didn't. I was able to talk to a phenomenal psychologist, counselor about everything. She works with first responders. And after that, I was able to go back to work. If you had told me I'd be a supervisor 2 years later, 4 years later, I would have said you're crazy, because I didn't want to do it. I was terrified to go back. But I think that knowing now what my experience was, what I went through, what my team went through, I try to teach my staff now that it's okay to be human. It's okay to have the emotions. One of the things that pissed me off the most about that night, for me, was I started shaking uncontrollably when they said, "Shots fired." I couldn't type. I was dry heaving into a trash can. And I was pissed at myself. I was so mad at myself for not being able to do my job. It's important to me that people know that we can train for this. We can listen to stories. How you react to it is how you react to it. It's not something you can prepare for. And you just have to do your best with what you're given. That's my story.
So I've been in dispatch 911 for about 13 years, and this happened, it was within my first year, and I want to say as an agency we have grown a lot. So I took a call that came in, and we verified the address, of course, and it's a boy that's on the line, and he tells me the street name. And I said, "What city is that in?" Because we verify city because we dispatch for the whole county. He says the city, and I said, "What state is that in?" Because I didn't recognize the city. And it was in a completely another state. I think it was in South Carolina. So we're going along. It was a landline. And so we're in a military town. They didn't update their address, which is what I figured out along the way because I was like, is this just completely wrong? So I'm trying to figure out what to do because this is way back for me at least, where we didn't have the same phone system, we didn't have the same capabilities of transferring, and I'm in my first year still, so I'm kind of freaked out a little bit. And so I'm getting a supervisor, and he says, "My sister hung herself." And so while they're trying to, I get the city and everything, I'm trying to get all that to them. I get him into the bedroom where the sister is with his dad, and we get her down. And so I can't transfer the call all the time. I'm not going to say hang up and dial 911 on another line or something. So I help Dad get the daughter taken down, and we start CPR. We're doing CPR for a long time. It feels like it's a year that I'm on the phone, but I look back and it's about 30 minutes that I was on the line because of the time of having to get my supervisor to get somebody else to call to get the agency going. We do CPR. Eventually, the dad's like, he keeps going, but he gives the son the phone. He goes out. What sticks out for me in this call is, one, I didn't know what to do at first. I was like, I don't know what's happening. Is that the son takes the phone, he's outside pacing back and forth, and I mean, I'm on the phone with the son a good 5-10 minutes solid of just him, and he's saying, "It's my fault. It's my fault that she did this. We had a fight earlier," and I'm trying to reassure him and tell him it's not your fault. You did everything you could. You did the right thing. You called 911. You know, we're getting help out there as fast as we can. It's one of the stories that I told a lot of my trainees of, this is why you always verify the address, because you never know where it actually is. It is also, like I said, our center, I feel like it's grown a lot. It's in my first year. I remember after I got off the call, of course we have late runs and things for how long it takes to drop the call. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this call. I can't drop it. You know, what am I supposed to do? So I ended up still put it in so they can still check the address. And the supervisor was like, I'm not really sure what to do for my late run. And she's like, well, you had the address. And that was the only checking that I got. It's one of the few calls, because I don't usually go off the floor for things. It's one of the few calls that I did. I was like, I'm taking a minute. I don't really care what you're saying. I didn't say that to her, but I said, I'm going to take a minute. And I went into the bathroom on the floor and cried for a minute, and I came back out. And so as a supervisor, I've told that to some people. One, I usually try to make it a little bit lighter than that, but of why, hey, this is really important, why we check the address. And two, I've told it to a couple people of why, what I don't want to be as a supervisor, and why when people take difficult calls, I really try to check on them and sometimes tell them, you're going off the floor. It's like, you're going to go take a walk. I want you to call somebody. I want you to do what you need to do to get off the floor, but for me, that's why I do what I do now as well, for not just our callers, but also the people, because that's something before this, I don't think I had thought about that in a while, but how it really did affect me for a long time, that he's just blaming himself the whole time. I'm like, baby, it's not your fault. You did what you could. So that's my story.
Thank you.
I feel like sometimes I'm a magnet for the teenage suicides. This one, it actually, talking about all this made me think about it. I got a call one night. A dad said his daughter shot herself in the closet. She was 15. And she was upstairs in her room, and I asked if she could be helped. And he was willing to do CPR. And in my mind, I'm automatically going into my CPR and what we can do, and just safety. I asked where the gun was at. And at that time, I didn't ask where the gunshot wound was. He wanted to help. Okay, let's do it. And so he pulls her out in a position where he can do CPR. He can't tell me if she's breathing or not. But as I'm a visual person, so I can kind of picture what he's seeing. And he's telling me every time that he does compressions, there's blood coming out of her mouth. And but he keeps going. And I can just, in that mindset of a parent, because I'm a parent, is you're going to do whatever you can do to save your kid. Gosh, I can't. And he kept doing it until first responders got there. And I found out later that she shot herself in the chest. And that she had actually left a note. And it was just over a boy. A boy at school. And which I feel is typical for our teenage suicides. And I probably compartmentalize some of that stuff because I don't want my kids to grow up and feel like that's their answer. And how do you protect them from that? And I just hope, you try not to beat yourself up in the choices that you make in the moment as a dispatcher, because I don't know how that family's doing. And if I could have told him just stay out of the room and not see that. And I know the last images he has of his daughters, or his daughter. And I just hope that they're okay. So.
Thank you.
I talk about my kids all the time, every chance I get. I know I've talked about them over and over again throughout the week. My wife and I have 3 sons. 2 of them are special needs. But my oldest one, my firstborn, was a game changer. I'm 23 years old, and my wife goes into it's at the 26-week mark, and my wife's in the hospital, and she's not doing good. I remember waking up the morning that my firstborn arrived. My wife was laying on the hospital bed and the blood was just gushing out of her nose. She had preeclampsia, and her organs were shutting down. A whole lot of stuff was going on. And I woke up that morning in the hospital room with her, and blood was just gushing. So I pushed the little red button, called the nurse in there, like, I don't know what's happening. And then it just seemed like a breeze. It just seemed like a big light flash, and everything just happened at one time. Doctors and everybody's rushing and taking her out. They get rushed to Tupelo, which is about an hour away. And the doctor told me if we don't get the baby out, your wife's gonna potentially pass away. Basically, he sounded a lot more professional than that, but that's basically what he said. Anyway, so he's born 26 weeks old, no pigmentation on his skin, a little over a pound. Scariest day of my life. I met him, they had him in an incubator, and they wheeled him out. He had a breathing tube down his throat, and that was the scariest day of my life. But fast forward, he spends his first 11 months in the hospital. My wife never left his side the whole time. So I go to work during the week, go see them on the weekend. We did that for 11 months. And he ended up having to get a trach, and he was put on a ventilator. And we had we were trained on how to take care of him and all that good stuff. So we finally get him home right before his first birthday. And a couple of weeks go by after his first birthday, and there's a trap in his ventilator tube that collects water, and it's a little release valve that you know, every time before you pick him up out of the crib, you have to unattach the tube, release the water, plug him back in. And I forgot to do that. And all the water rushed straight down into his lungs. And he immediately turned gray. And his eyes were bloodshot almost immediately. And what I was doing, I was taking him out to change out his trach. So we have to do that every so often. And my wife had his head in her lap, and she's just screaming. And I went into go mode. I ripped the tube off his trach, ripped the trach out, put a new trach back in. I get the ambu bag, I crank it up, the oxygen, I'm just pumping him full of air. And by the grace of God, I thought I was doing everything I could, I don't know. By the grace of God, all that water just comes busting out of his mouth. And we sit him up, I hook him back up to his ventilator, and he smiles. And now I do that for a living over the phone. And every time it gets me. And it brings me back to me having to do CPR on my firstborn child. And it never gets any easier. But you power through it. And I used to say a day at a time, but break it down to a minute at a time. I just thank God for every minute that I have, wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing. I try to focus on. I try to count my blessings in every aspect. So I thank everybody for having the courage and the balls to share everything that they've been through over the course of their career, and I thank everybody. Thank you so much.
All right, so we have just a few minutes to. Well, who's ready to laugh? Yeah? Okay. So before we go to lunch and this amazing week ends, we're going to jump into some funny stories. Who has a funny story that they would like to share?
So I've got a quick one. So I first started dispatching EMS in Fort Worth. So it was late at night, and the 911 call comes in. I answer the phone. It's one of the local nursing homes. You verify the address, phone number, get her name, all that kind of stuff. So, okay, tell me exactly what happened. Well, I walked into his room, and he's got an issue with his catheter. She's like not saying what she wants to say. I tell she puts her hand over the headset and like talks to her partners like, I don't know what to say. She's like, just say it. And she goes, well, he's got a problem with his penis. Some sort of infection. So I was like, okay, so I type it in there. I was like, back of my mind, I'm like, we're professionals. It's just say it. So I don't know if y'all use EMD. The next question is, okay, tell me exactly what happened. I ask, are you with the penis now instead of are you with the patient now? And just kind of, we all kind of laughed and just moved on to process the rest of the call. But it was just one of those things.
Thank you. Who else had it?
I don't think I can top that. I was working, before I was in Grand Prairie, I worked in Austin as a call taker. And so this is, I got a call from a guy this guy called and he was trapped in the bathroom at the Bat Bar on 6th Street in the patio bathroom. So he was trapped in there, could not get out. He's banging on the door. All I can hear is banging and loud music, the club music thumping in the background. And he's like, I'm trapped in here. There's no one's coming. No one can hear me. And he's kind of hyperventilating a little bit. And so I don't know what to do. So I get the fire department on the line, and of course the fireman just laughs when I tell him what's going on. But while I'm talking to him and we're trying to figure out how to get this guy out of this bathroom, he's talking to himself, and he was at some conference, and he's just like very being really hard on himself, and he's like, I just had to have one more drink. I just had to go in for one more drink. And that I caught that, and me and the fireman just started laughing again, and we're like, well, we're trying, sir. We're going to get somebody out there. And then right at that moment, just a huge ruckus and what sounded like the door caving in. And all I hear is him yelling, I'm free. And then that was it.
Nice. Thank you. All right. Over here. All right. Rapid fire.
Yeah, mine's pretty short and sweet. So I got a 911 missed dial that came in. It was a cell phone, and luckily it had a face too, because when I called the guy back, of course it's not going to say 911, it shows our admin line. And so he's like, well, how do I know you're 911? And I could hear beeping in the background that said, are you at the HEB on Adams? And I said the city name, and he was like, good enough for me. And so I was like,
perfect, thank you. Who else? Anybody else have a story?
I'll share.
Oh, okay. Here you go.
Thank you. So I had a guy who called, his wife was pregnant, and I was going through the pregnancy protocol, and I was like, okay, can you see any part of the baby? And there's a little bit of a language barrier, and he's like, she won't let me near her. I'm like, okay. So I got on the phone with her, and I was like, can you feel any part of the baby? And she's like, yes, I can feel part of the baby. I'm like, okay. So I get through that, and for him, like, gathering this stuff. And I go through and tell him, like, put your hands under so you can kind of, like, bring the baby out. Don't prevent the birth. And I'm like, do you understand what I'm saying? And he goes, yes, push the baby back in. No, sir. No, do not push the baby back in. And I was like, is the baby still out? And he goes, oh, no. And I'm like, oh, geez. So shortly after, EMS gets on scene and delivered the baby. So he apparently pushed it back in.
Oh, no. Thank you so much. One over here. All right. Oh, you got it. Thank you. All right.
So this one was when I was still in training. I was in phones training. And this guy called in. He was obviously intoxicated. He admitted he was drinking as well. And he said he had chest pain. So you're going through the chest pain protocol. And one of the questions you ask is, have you ever had a heart attack or angina? And he just says, vagina? I don't have one of those. And I'm just sitting there like trying not to lose it, trying to hold my composure together. And he can tell like I'm trying not to laugh. And he's like, are you laughing at me because I don't have a vagina? And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, I should because I'm wearing very sparkly cowboy boots right now. And I would look great in them if I had a vagina. It was just, it was just a laugh.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome back, and there you have it. That was Imagine Listening and Open Mic while out there back in March. Again, March 2024, just a few months ago. That's all the audio from this episode. And as I said, this was done with a live audience out at the Mayan Ranch for the 911 leadership event that the 360-degree dispatcher run by my good friend Joe Serio puts on out there in Bandera, Texas. And the entire week was just different. Every time I have been out at the Mayan Ranch for this 911 leadership event, it has been amazing. It has been powerful. There was something about this one. I think what it is Joe always says, he puts it out there, and I've said this in my classes as well, you get out of this what you put in. And every single one of the folks during this specific class, they all put in and they got so much out of it. They all opened up, they shared. There's a core group that they talk daily. And the first time they all spoke together again after the ranch, I believe they spoke for about 8 hours over FaceTime or something. They spoke for a very, very long time. And again, they have all kept in touch with each other, and just so many good things have happened. But there you have it. That is their Imagine Listening session from the ranch, including the open mic piece, and all the written stories and everything were recorded and put in there. And I'm proud of every single one of you. Thank you all for being there, for sharing. And even if you didn't share a story, thank you, because you were there in support of each other. And that is what Imagine Listening is all about. So thank you once again for everything that you do and for being in support of each other. And to my homies, Joe and Amy and all of the other instructors that were there, thank you so very much. And also for continuing to give me the opportunity to go out there and close out the ranch with Imagine Listening. So for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media. You can become a supporter of the podcast. The easiest way to do that is to simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. Once again, that's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything there: email, social media, latest episode, where to buy Imagine Listening the book, where to pre-order book number 2, and when it's going to be coming out, and just so much more stuff that's on there. So make sure to check that out. And I thank you all for the support. Shout out to the subscribers, as well as in Digital, a Leader Next Gen Core Services, as they sponsor this episode and all the episodes, really. You can see this on Facebook, YouTube, as well as LinkedIn Live and X. And you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. And we will see you all in the next one.
The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. Al Pacino may have been talking about football when he said this line in Any Given Sunday,
but he might as well have been talking about 911 dispatch. Every second on every call could be the difference for the person on the other end of the line, and you use your hard-earned skills to save as many of them as possible. Now, there's a tool that can help you save more of them. Prepared Assist is built to save you from repeating a question, from having to add an extra note, and from pulling in a third party to translate. That's why telecommunicators are saying they use it on every single call. Save the seconds that save lives with Prepared Assist. Visit prepared911.com/assist to learn more.